All right, welcome to Cbus Mob. This is your host, Allison Harrison. I have with me Lisa Kagy at Recruit. And Lisa, please introduce yourself.
Yes. Hi. Well, it's nice to be here, Allison. Thank you. And yes, I started Recruit. Recruit.io is the address and part of the name as well in a little over a year ago. And I've had a lot of fun creating something new. It's a staffing recruiting firm specializing in roles that move the business forward. And that falls into technology, accounting and finance, some people roles that also move the business forward, including project managers. And I help companies find individuals who are long-term fits, and contract to hire. I do throw into the long-term fit category, and some of the project work. My goal is to help candidates find positions that do move their careers forward.
Yeah. Okay. And you were in recruiting before you started your own firm, correct?
I was.
So what made you make the jump?
Yeah, I was mostly in the tech space. I tell folks it's still my comfortable pair of jeans. It's an industry that I know and understand well. And I do work with partners in other roles that require a depth of knowledge in other spaces. I've just enjoyed the work in previous roles. By creating recruit.io, I found that I could tailor my approach efforts a little bit differently and in a way that I'd always gravitated towards. Honestly, what inspired me is I faced a job loss. And like so many others, going through that process was not as cut and dry for me. And being on the other side of that coin, often it's easy to assume what the process looks like. And for me, it was a little bit different. I realized the weight of perceived risk had lifted. And that was really the thing that started recruit.io. And I found that I can't say that I've always been enamored by the business of staffing and recruiting, but I found that I had an interest in continuing to find ways to improve the industry to the benefit of those who I work with, really in any capacity.
Yeah. So you said something, the perceived risk was removed. What happened to remove that risk? Where you're like, yeah, I can totally do this.
Yeah, there's a security in working for an organization that is stable and has great people, and it's a great environment, right? There's a lot of things that it's easy to say, hey, I really love to do these things or try some of these different things, but things are fine. And yeah, there is a level of, hey, we're going to do this on our own. And yeah, at this point, if you would have told me that 10 years ago that I would be doing all of these things on my own, I would have probably thought you were nuts. But there is that sense of, well, I have health benefits. I have steady income. I have these other built-in platforms that are already there that felt very risky to depart from at any point. So yeah, and I think there are other entrepreneurs that feel the same way, that eventually, maybe on their own portion or not, end up in a position that says, you know what? Are those things actually stability, or are they perceived stability? And what does it mean to put that on the table and say, it may not be everything that we think, and really come from that place of, I don't want to say bravery, but in my sense, it was also, I was able to, at that time, go out on my own and do some different things.
Yeah. No,
and not everyone has that luxury.
No, it's not. And to me, I don't even know what that stability is like, because I've had my own practice for so long. But you're right. There is that perceived, oh, I get a paycheck every week or every 2 weeks and I have health insurance. But if you run your own company, the world's your oyster. Like, you can go as big or as small, and you can work when you need to make some money and not work if you don't. Like, you have that flexibility. But I know you well enough to know you're not going to be like, oh, I'm just going to work enough so that I can pay my bills. Like, you're going for something, I think, a little bit more than that. So like, how have you seen your company grow in the last year?
Well, I faced a few challenges. There was a change of industry. I had a non-compete, though, that I wanted to respect out of choice, which led me to learning and really understanding how to recruit for areas that I wasn't comfortable in initially. And I wasn't a recruitment industry this year. We all know that hiring has stalled somewhat, and the startup economy wasn't quite it either. Being able to balance all of those roles, wanting every idea to thrive, that initial, knowing what to invest in and when to invest in it and when to invest in what, and just kind of having that circle back. Those were all factors.
Yeah. So when you opened your own firm to be able to do this recruiting, did you have one resource, one podcast, one book, one person who you were like, this is like what's helping me navigate these waters because they're all new?
Yeah, there wasn't one. I found that there were a variety of really interesting groups out there that help new business owners. The Accelerate Columbus is a great one. I think it's Shout Out has some really interesting platforms for learning and engagement. And the NGLCC is another great example. There are a lot of organizations out there that have materials out there, even some of the larger companies that uh, are really geared towards helping small businesses thrive. And there are organizations within our local community as well that have been incredibly helpful. Some of it too is when I first, both of my siblings are in the staffing and recruiting industry. So, this has been a conversation around the dinner table for years. And initially, my brother is still a consultant as well of mine and does assist, especially with your finance and accounting roles. He's phenomenal in that space. He was a strong motivator. And here's some things that you can do that are probably going to be different than the way that I do them, but it also helps model how does this work from the place that I am now.
Yeah. Yeah. It is nice to have a cheerleader or at least someone has your back to be like, you can do this. Like it sounds like that's what your brother was to you, is like, you got this, Lisa. Just keep going forward. Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So you mentioned two things. You mentioned NGLCC and then not experienced Columbus. I've lost it.
At the Accelerator.
Startup. Accelerator Columbus. Yeah.
Yes.
So I'm curious, the Columbus one, was that in person? Was it like events to like help you in person, or they have website like resources? Kind of how is someone to utilize that?
And it's a really accumulation of all of the above, but they did have in-person biweekly courses that were geared towards minority small business owners. And it did help in talking about how to understand the market you're in, how to different ways to, I guess, even just set up a website, things that you don't think about. What are some things you need to do to be tax compliant? What are some things that need to be in place across the board from an operational standpoint, where it was very helpful. And it did help just build a network as well. Or who can you call up and say, hey, I have this question about bookkeeping. I'm not a bookkeeper, and that's not a space that I thrive. So reaching out to, okay, I'm going to need an expert in this space, or I found that to be incredibly helpful in that capacity.
Yeah, no, that's great. I mean, I think those things I get those questions when people hit me up that are like, hey, I want to grow because they've got their business. And I was like, well, you don't have a website. Like, let's go get you one of those. They can be incredibly expensive, or if you're willing to like bootstrap it and do a little bit yourself, you can do it pretty reasonably. Did you bootstrap your website? Like you were like, I'm going to figure this out? Or you're like, I'll spend a few thousand and have someone do it for me?
I sure did. It's still in its first iteration. So anybody who's going to my website, thank you. And I'm sorry. Yeah, I put it together relatively quickly. In the work that I do, so much of it is based off of relationships and working directly with individuals, that it's the website is generally not a large driver, besides sharing articles or sharing what jobs are open, that kind of thing. A little bit about who, what I do.
To me, the website just validates like you are a real company. Like that to me,
I exist.
As long as it doesn't look like it was built in 96, like it's okay. Like you know.
No. So unfortunately for my seat, having access to some phenomenal technologists, I could call a cybersecurity expert and say, hey, listen, all I need is for my email to be delivered into an email box. How do I do that?
Yeah, but it's all the things that if you are not running a business, you completely take for granted. You're like, of course you have a website and you have an email address and you get mail, because occasionally you do need to get mail. Like, how does that happen?
Right. And coming into all those little things that you don't really see coming, but they make sense. It's just not until you to walk into the front door and you're like, that's what I need to do.
What was your biggest surprise in running the business of like, man, I have to do this? Like, is there one thing that just like stands out?
I think the things that stand out for me was the surprise was how much I really enjoyed discovering those rocks and turning them over. I never saw myself as a research person. I was a doer person. And I really found that, I really like leaning into, how can we put things together in a way that they work well? And that was just really kind of an interesting surprise for me, that I felt comfortable leaning into the spaces that I was unfamiliar with.
Yeah. No, I think that's huge. Now, I have a question, and there's no wrong answer. How much did you use ChatGPT to help you figure this stuff
Oh
out?
my goodness.
My wife
You
recently
know,
found it out that ChatGPT exists, and so every time I ask a question, she's like, "Hold on," and then she talks into it to get the answer. It's great, right?
I don't use it on my phone. I do use it pretty consistently for, and in a lot of my world, there's a lot of communication, a lot of writing, a lot of creating job descriptions and learning basic contracts. A lot of information can be found, and obviously those things need to be double checked and verified, preferably by some experienced lawyers. But there are a lot of things that can get just a little two steps further by using some of these AI tools, and really as a solopreneur, expanding bandwidth. And that might mean ChatGPT, it might mean other tools as well to assist in just some basic efficiencies.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think it's the best thing for new business owners because if you're just like, I don't know how to get an email address or a website, like throw that in ChatGPT. It'll get you an answer. Like vet it a little bit, but at least you don't have to like sit there and I remember as a kid, you sit around the dinner table and be like, I wonder what the answer to this is. And now it's like, well, just Google it or put it in a large language model and you'll get the answer and then check to make sure it's right.
Right. So
Yeah.
I'll be interested to see where that's headed. But for right now, it is a useful tool.
Yeah. All right. I want to circle back. You said NGLCC. So I know what that is, but I don't know if everyone does.
Yeah.
So the National Gay and Lesbian Chamber of Commerce. You're a certified business, are you, Lisa?
Mhm. I am.
Yeah. Okay.
Mhm.
All right. I couldn't remember. I should know because I do these certifications, but whoops. So what did you get out of NGLCC? Because one of the questions I will have for you is like, how do you use your minority status to succeed and thrive? But what did you get from NGLCC when you were starting out?
Yeah. A lot of it wasn't through the NGLCC directly, but there are some local groups, obviously the Diversity Chamber in Columbus, but one I connected with quite a bit was Plexus in the Cleveland area. And there were several different kinds of business owners that were part of the group who could really relate in not just a business capacity. There are many awesome startup groups that work, but also really feel comfortable about talking about all aspects of the life because as it turns out, obviously life and work, is it a balance? No, it's probably some mucky soup, but as a business owner, it's even more so. And so there is having those groups to have some of those very open, candid conversations with made it a little bit easier to talk about the mucky soup. And they just have some great resources. And that includes like, we talked about website, like, well, what exactly is SEO? What does that do for you? And what organizations, might be supportive partnerships. And I think that's been useful as well, connecting with other small business owners who in some way I can partner with to then create more offerings as well.
Because you started another group for the tech sector, right? Weren't you a founder of Zettabytes here locally in
Yeah.
Columbus?
Zettabytes.today, myself and Rini Das, and Rini Das still carries on the torch. And Vinny San Filippo, gosh, I hope I'm pronouncing his name right. We've known each other forever. That's been it was a really interesting organization. I had a blast working with the team, putting it together back in 2019, just before COVID, creating a safe space for the LGBTQ community in technology. Found that many organizations have ERGs or BRGs or a variety pack of whatever you want to call them.
Yeah.
But so many individual or companies don't. In our community, that's not visible necessarily. And there are a lot of individuals who may not feel comfortable being out in their own current environment or may not feel comfortable asking some of the questions, and having a group, a sounding and having some of those places to access learning in a safe space was a really cool thing to start to build. And I think that was one of something that did inspire me even now with everyrecruit.io was being able to build a community, build safe spaces. And even though it's in a very different context, it was maybe a catalyst or inspiration. I didn't realize it then for how do we create something new from nothing that helps a group of people.
Yeah. So with your recruiting, are you focusing within the queer community? Because you mentioned Plexus, which is Cleveland's LGBT chamber, diversity chamber, and then Zettabytes, which is not a chamber, but it is a space and a community. And so I'm just curious if that's part of your recruiting.
It's not in direct sense. Like obviously for me, really understanding and growing in the D&I space and is hugely important. And that's something that I stay very rooted in. And it's something that I keep at the forefront of my mind in my recruiting practices and in working with my clients. I'm not geared towards any specific community in any aspect or regard because I really do believe in an all-inclusive recruitment model. And that means everybody. So
Yeah.
that's something that is very, very important to me. Now, I know that through some of the partnerships that I maintain, it's important for me to work with partners that do support and support who I am and what my business is. And that has made a difference in the sense that I do find myself working with more local providers. I find myself investing in minority businesses as well, and really understanding a little bit about some of the things they're going through and investing in that. I think it's not that I am focused on one particular group or another particular group, but more of an idea of like, who else supports everyone and what does that mean to them? And that is the question that I find myself asking.
I think it's a great question, right? How do we support all our entire community, right? And I think that's, man, it's powerful. Well, Lisa, I don't know that I have a ton more questions. There's a couple that I want to hit on though before we wrap up. Is you talk about your partnerships, and I think something that can be scary for minority business owners is like developing those partnerships and finding the people to reach out to. Because for me, I think I was always taught networking were like these big group event settings, and it is, I have gone to them where it's all heteronormative men, and that is incredibly intimidating. And I've gone to it where it's heteronormative women. And as someone who is a little bit more fluid, sometimes it can feel incredibly intimidating as well, because even though it's a group full of women and I identify as female, it's awkward. I don't have a husband with 2 kids and a dog, right? I have a wife and 2 cats and no kids. And so I think those can be kind of incredibly difficult hurdles. I have found my community, and it sounds like you have too. So if you could kind of just explain how you've done that, how you found these partners where you can be your authentic self.
Sure. And I can relate to that. There are, especially in my industry, I have some there are, first of all, amazing men that have been both mentors to me and have really helped me grow in the space. Not being exclusive of that, I have found that I will also not be creating relationships on the golf course. That's just, it's not going to happen for me. And there is a certain, I guess it's just a certain culture that I may not find myself completely comfortable in, even within the industries that I work all of the time. It actually kind of maybe circling back a little bit to maybe not partnerships as they are just in general, although there is, with anything, there's always, everybody carries some sort of bias, like, well, you're like me, so obviously you'll understand. And that may not necessarily be true. And I think there needs to be some awareness around that when I say some of these things. But most people don't know this about me. But for the most of my life in the general public, I was very shy. I'm still maybe a little. And
I would never guess being
course,
shy.
my entire business is around talking to people. But I joke around that the reason I'm comfortable in almost any room is because I'm equally uncomfortable in all of the rooms. But that could be a lot of things. Right now, I have the tool set, and maybe some of the confidence came from having success in my work. Obviously, I guess gain confidence in your skill set in your work any other way. But there's a sense of self-authenticity that is out there for everyone to see. And there is, I think that sense of openness comes with a sense of boundary too. And that's kind of an interesting balance for me to ride. Things are different. I grew up in small town Ohio, and now I'm proud of it. But, as an elementary and middle school kid, I was a free range homeschooled kid, which was a little
Free
weird.
range. I have not heard that before.
It's a different model. And it was a little bit weird in the 90s. I was very lucky to have some very open-minded parents who are rooted also in an education field themselves. And so this was possible. But at that age, when I had like perm bangs and pink glasses and all the things, and I felt all of the thing. Every kid feels like an other, right? In middle school, that's just part of it. But I felt like the other. And then high school, there was also discovering my place in the LGBTQ alphabet. And I didn't know anybody who looked like me, felt like me. And whether that's by design or whatever, but on top of what it meant then in high school, what does it mean to be a woman? And what does this mean for my place in the fabric of society? And how do I interact with it? And that's my early career experience firsthand. So the obstacles that young women are challenged to overcome. So, and that's probably a well for another day, but somewhere along the line, I did find my joy was connecting people, and I think that's the thing. It's like others didn't feel the other factor so much as I didn't want them to feel that other factor. So I think it was a combination of mentors and growth, relationships, and maybe just kind of going through the fire and experiencing some of these firsthand these things that maybe initially left me out of the ballgame would later fuel the things that I found could empower my journey, but empower and fuel other journeys as well. And that could be clients, and that could be teams, that could be candidates, and that could be partners, and that could be folks I network with. And how can I continue to be a positive force in some of those spaces?
Do you think it creates a little bit of relatability there, right? We hire people because we can relate in some way. It doesn't have to be you look exactly like me or you have the same lived experience, but there's something that can relate.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely. I mean, it can be not a dictator, but I guess it may be a moving current towards, it's channeling towards those things. So it's channeling, okay, I can see in multiple conversations, okay, what does it mean to be empathetic and exclusive? What is inclusive, and what does it mean to be authentic? And how does that change business? How does that change interactions? And although maybe, again, being a minority status doesn't necessarily dictate these things, I think it can lend to having a unique perspective through having some of those formative experiences.
Yeah. I once had a man call our office, say, I want to work with your firm because it's all women, and I just think I will get better service. And I remember at the time, I was like, that's wild. Like, I don't think of that, but it was very much like his perception on the world. And he was like super happy with how we communicated. He was like, this was what I was looking for. And I was just like, I would never think that, but maybe there is something to lived experience, relatability, what's happened over time.
It could be. And it works on not necessarily just towards diversity, but thinking about the human experiences in my world, it's literally like matchmaking. I went to school for photography, not for business, but
that's totally what you're doing now. Yeah.
Totally what I'm doing now. Listen, my parents are real glad I'm just not living in their basement at this point, probably. But there's this sense of storytelling I love. Yeah.
I would say you're creating art, creating a match between an employer and employee. Like, that is hard. That is a heavy lift. Every employer struggles with it. So you are creating magic over there, Lisa.
Well, the hope is that it's taking a true story and filtering it, I guess, if we want to talk about photography. I've said it before, but it's a little bit like filtering it through my lens and being able to say, here's this vision. What do you see when you see it? And, could this person, be, aid your environment? They haven't spoken with this person yet. They haven't seen this person's resume. So a lot of that has to filter through with my storytelling ability. Is this truthful? Is this accurate as well as anybody can know when speaking with another human? Here's the end result. Here's what I think they could do for you. And then vice versa. Teams and companies, I think the easy thing to forget is recruiters, especially third-party recruiters that are reaching out to just tons and tons of people on your behalf. I mean, that is branding, and that is talking about the story of the culture. It is talking about the story of the environment or projects, challenges, and challenges are good things, and how to frame those in a way that really lifts up that team and that company, but is also rooted in truth and reality. And so that all of those things match like puzzle pieces is the goal. And obviously there's a lot of leaning on a lot of people to make that happen, but being the catalyst is a fulfilling space to be in.
Yeah. Yes, I agree on all of the things. All right. Well, Lisa, I have one last question for you, which is, if there's one thing you wish you knew before you started your business, what would that be?
When I first started, I dipped my toe in the water. I don't think I subscribed to a single software platform that was longer than 6 months. Yeah. I'm doing this, right? So, and do think new business owners need to do a couple of things. And one of those is jump in all of the way. And that could avoid some delays and really hitting the ground running. And by hitting the ground running, it doesn't necessarily mean just working with a lot of people, but it also means really understanding your client and what they really appreciate about your business, and finding those clients that appreciate those same things is so critical. And then outside of that, it can be very isolating working solo, and even getting ideas and advice from others is great, but they're not part of the day-to-day business and they don't see the full pictures. It is also very easy, especially when things are a little challenging, to stay isolated. So for new business owners, staying social is also
Yeah,
key.
it's huge.
It is. So groups like this are fantastic.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, awesome. I think that is great advice for anyone who's thinking about running a business. Thank you so much, Lisa.
Thank you. I appreciate it.